I feel like we got cocaine in here.
Do we? It'll offset the cost of the car. So obviously, as you can see, making sure that she does all of it. Taking apart the El Camino. Gotta get this pile of awesomeness out of here.
Oh, it's one of those big ones.
Which one?
The ones with the creepy legs. Get out of there, Al.
Move.
Oh, there's two of them. Are they alive? Oh, they're alive.
Yeah.
Fuck that. Oh.
What you doing?
Don't go around like that.
What's got going on here? Shh.
I'm trying not to reach in there.
You need strong hands. And if it's a strength thing,
Need you.
well, if it's a strength thing, you got weak sausage fingers. So yeah, she's just kind of messing with that, while at the same time we got Liam getting some much needed maintenance. I gotta get the axle out of this thing because the axle seal has been leaking for a while now, and it's time to finally change it out. So right here you can see this little drip area. That's where it's leaking out. This is the different seal that we used. It goes around the outside, I guess, of that bearing, but it doesn't really have a very good sealing surface on the outside of the tube area. So I don't know, it just doesn't work very good at all. So on all of the races so far, I've been having to, shove paper towels in there in between rounds and, wipe down the wheel, make sure nothing got on the road, both for my safety and other people's safety. It's, it started to be, it's too much effort, especially between rounds when I need to be looking at the tune or, looking at the road, watching other people race, or trying to do some video. Yeah, we're just gonna go ahead and change it out. The bearing that we put in there originally, it was a different kind of bearing. It wasn't a sealed bearing. It didn't have that O-ring on the outside. So we had to use a different type of seal that doesn't seem to be working good. So we're gonna switch it out for what we know works good. What's on the other side is a regular 9-inch bearing with the O-ring on the outside. So that's what we're going with. This one's the driver's side. This one's not leaking at all. And this is the original bearing. So yeah, this is the bearing itself. There's no seal that goes over it. It's a sealed bearing. And on the outside, in this end, is an O-ring along the outside of this bearing. That's what it's sealing up against. And then the inside is just a press fit onto the axle. And the body of the bearing itself is sealed. So apparently a much better design. So that's what we got to do right now, is replace the other side with the type of bearing that's in this.
How not to take a radiator.
Yeah, it's an interesting method.
Ooh.
Get it?
Trying to prove I didn't need you.
Yeah, but, oh, so much stuff just came out of that. We're just trying to see if we can take off the whole front end so that we don't have to lift up the motor so high. Because what I don't want to do is have to lift this motor up really high, tilt it to get, come with the tranny out as well. I just want to lift it up a little bit and then come forward. So we're going to try to take the whole front end off. And we've never worked on one of these before, so trying to see how much shit we got to take off before it starts coming apart. Get to it.
I am. I'm slower than you.
Haha, I see what you did there. Ta-da. All right, tried to make it as easy on ourselves as possible to get this engine out. So we took the whole front end apart. Plus, kind of wanted to see how much all this stuff weighed. It is heavy. Like, I see how people are able to get, so much weight out of these things. These fenders are no joke. Like, there's a lot of bracing and structure in this stuff.
Definitely getting a new hood.
Yeah, the hood, it feels like an anchor. And then that whole front assembly feels like an anchor. Like, I gotta imagine somebody makes either like a plastic or a, lightweight of some sort replacement for something like that. Unless everybody just kind of fabricates their own up, I'm not sure. But yeah, the bumper is heavy as hell, the hood is heavy as hell, that assembly is heavy as hell. And then these fenders too. So that's all a lot. Like with the truck, we couldn't get a whole lot of that kind of weight out of it. There wasn't a whole lot of structure to anything. So yeah, hopefully we can take a lot of weight out of that stuff. All right guys, so we have a little bit more of a problem than we originally thought. This seal is the thing that we wanted to replace. It's not working very well. It's letting a lot of fluid past it. And the last bearing that we had in there had an O-ring on the outside of it, and that was a much better design. This one, not that great, obviously leaking, but when we took this bracket assembly off, usually the caliper's right here, and when you take this collar off that holds this seal in, I was pulling away this seal and noticed that the bearing is already starting to come apart, which is not good. The last bearing that was in here, it was falling apart also. So when we broke the rear end, we took it apart and we noticed, hey, that bearing's falling apart, so we need to get a new one. That's why we have this setup in here, because we were trying to get it done quick, needed to race, and this is all that they had at the local parts store. So we went with it, but we hated it. So this one's only been in here for maybe, I don't know, four months or something like that. And really didn't have a whole lot of miles on it. And this one is, as you can see, already starting to fall apart. So I'm gonna get this axle out and take that bearing out and show you how bad it actually is. Hopefully the bearings that we're putting in there are gonna be better quality and will last as long as the first time. Because last one's about 3.5 years of absolute abuse, maybe 8,000 miles on them. And yeah, they were falling apart when we took them out, but they were working all the way up until then. So hopefully we can find something better. Now, what I'm really worried about is why these bearings are failing in the first place. My biggest worry is that the rear end's always been a little bit crooked, and so it's putting, or not the rear end, that tube in particular. I think it's always been a little bit crooked, putting extra strain on that bearing because the axle is going through the diff, and if the tube is crooked, then that axle is always going to be a little bit off center of the tube, especially at the very end. And that bearing wants to sit in the tube. So it's going to constantly be pushing the bearing hard up against one side of the tube. So I think that's what's going on. I don't know if it's gotten worse because we had to rotate the tube and re-weld it. But just from seeing the first bearing that came out of there was damaged, I think it was an existing problem. I don't think it's gotten worse. So hopefully I just put a quality bearing in there that we can get by until we can get a new rear end in this, because that's going to be the ultimate fix for this, I think, is to get a straight rear end in it. Is there?
Do you have the
What? Nope.
Oh, poor bearing. Oh shit, the outer chase actually stayed in there.
All right, so we got the axle pulled out. It was way easier than it was last time to pull it out, and that's because this bearing is completely kaput. Bad news is it was easy to come out because the outer portion of the bearing actually stayed in there. So I gotta try to pry that out and hope that it's not a real pain in the ass to get out. So anyway, we'll pull this axle all the way out and then work on getting this thing out because the new bearing's got to go in there. So I could not, I got a press and everything, thinking that I was going to be able to set it up some way to, I texted Nick and I was like, dude, what the hell do you do with these things? And he was like, you're putting a new bearing in everything, right? It's like, yeah, just cut it off. I was like, oh, I guess, yeah, I could do that. So cut some slits in there. The wheel that I had was brand new. It was really big, and so I started cutting. Once I got down to almost the point where it was all the way through, it started cutting into the axle surface, which I didn't want to do. So if you can see up here, there's a good amount of meat left on that. And so I just ended up taking a chisel basically and putting it in there, hammering the shit out of it so that it could crack a little bit, expanding it just enough to be able to be tapped off. So now I have the remnants of the old bearing and the old retaining collar. Yeah, and then, I'm gonna slide this off still, but yeah. So seals off, axle's by itself, got the new axle. We should be able to use this to put the new axle on. So we'll get to that right now. All right, so here's how we're gonna do this. I think this will work good. I got the ring underneath. Obviously I'll hold it, well, I don't know. We're gonna find out. If I gotta hold this as straight as possible, maybe it's not the thing to use. So I don't know, we'll give this a try. If it's not tight enough on the axle or these plates keep wanting to spread, then we'll give something else a try. But I've got a couple of things that I can stack up top so that it pushes on this lip instead of just going directly in the middle on this. And that should press this down into this bearing so I can get the bearing to go all the way up to the top. That's the goal. Let's see how this works out. Some of you guys are probably watching this saying, that's not gonna work, you're a moron. I gotta learn. However improper it may have been, it worked. So I ended up not being able to keep the plates completely together. I had to cockeye one of them because the circle part, so this one's really big, there's a small one on the other side. It was a little bit too big to actually push on just the collar right there. So this one I put the axle all the way up against it so that it sat all the way around that circle outlet or cutout. And then this one I just cockeyed a little bit so that it was at least holding it in the center. And just stacked some plates on here so that we were pushing down onto that. And yeah, it slid all the way down. So if you can see there, yeah, we went all the way up to the shoulder of this axle. This is a larger diameter than what the bearing is actually on right now. So all should be well. And I actually did have to go and look up what side the O-ring is supposed to be on. I don't think it makes that big of a difference, but I just wanted to make sure that we were doing the same that we did on the other side. And it looks like they recommend the O-ring is supposed to be toward the flange. I'm gonna be really pissed if we put the axle in there and the O-ring doesn't actually make it all the way in to the end. Because if I look at the axle on the other side, there's barely, there's just barely some of this bearing sticking out. And it looks like if it's the same type of bearing, the O-ring's gotta be like right there. So I don't know, hopefully it sits in there far enough to where the O-ring can seal on the end and do its job. So I'm gonna slide this thing back in there and see how it looks. This is the problem that I think we're having. So, I mean, it's not all the way, it's more like this. So there's, if you can see here, the gap is bigger on the front side than the back side. So what I'm thinking is going on here is that this axle tube has always been bent slightly forward. Once we get this bearing in there, because I mean we can, but it does take a decent amount of force to push this axle forward so that it can be lined up with the hole. And we push it in, but that means there's always tension on this bearing. Now, I mean, I haven't done a whole lot of these. I don't know if that's something that always happens. If there's always kind of some tension on there. I would imagine that this axle tube is supposed to be as straight as possible, so the bearing is supposed to basically just line right up at rest and not put significant pressure one way or another on it. Like, I'll probably pull this one out pretty soon just to check and see, you know, what the kind of wear rate is, I guess, what the condition is after like 4 months or something like that, or maybe 3 months. Yeah, we'll see how it's doing. If it's good, then we know obviously it was, one of the variables is the brand of bearing, the quality of bearing, and we'll make sure that we always have a really high quality bearing in on this side. You know, hope that they last a decent amount of time, but it'll always be at minimum a yearly thing that we change out. But we'll see. I mean, a year from now, maybe we'll be in a position where we can slap a new rear end in there.
Is there a fucking nut in the back of this?
Oh. Tanya working hard. Trying to figure that shit out.
What are you doing?
Nothing. All right, so we got this one all back together. Rotor and calipers back on. Put that bracket that you saw a little bit ago back on. Didn't have to use any washers because I had all of those little shims. And so I just stacked the shims until they were just right to fit behind the bracket and up against the face of the bearing. And that should be good. So I'm gonna start it up now and just put it in gear, rotate it, make sure everything is good to go, and then put the wheel back on and we should be ready to rock.
Get something to eat late at night or early in the morning once we're done, and then head over to Sunday service. So yeah, here it goes. Got his car completely back together. We're heading out to the meat spot and it's foggy as shit. Can't see more than maybe like 30 yards in front of you. So gotta be careful. It's really, really humid too. I mean, everything on the truck was completely soaking wet. Like the entire car looked like that. So hopefully we can get it all dried off and everything. Hopefully the sun comes out and actually burns off some of this. But yeah, if you look at it, I mean, literally everywhere. So I got to put the rest of the stuff back in the bed, but I literally, I had this whole back just packed with prep and oil and another fuel jug and tools, all the just in case stuff. So got to get that back in there. So far it's been about an hour and 20 minutes worth of driving. and I hear it's going to be about half an hour more or so for the cruise, and then we'll have basically at least an hour drive back home. So Liam's getting a workout today, and the test hits that we made, I'm pretty sure these tires are going away. I don't think there's a whole lot of life left on them, so we gotta get a new set ordered for sure. Especially all the driving that we're about to do on them, they're probably not gonna do too well anymore. We gotta get some of the proof that Prime's pure street car. 93. Got that fancy stuff.
We don't like the 85 over here.
Come on.
We like to live on the edge.
I can't see shit. It's actually really dangerous. I'm not sure we should get on the highway. Oh, we're getting on the highway.